Welcome to the Metal Detecting Podcast, brought to you by XP Metal Detectors. We're digging the plugs and pinpointing the topics you want to hear. Now here's your hosts, Dave Kimball and Grant Hansen.
This show is brought to you by XP Metal Detectors. XP Metal Detectors is a high-end, innovative metal detector company with high-end metal detectors, coils, and pinpointers. For more information, go to xpmetaldetectors.com. For a dealer near you, try a Google search or go to xpteamusa.com. Hello and welcome to the Metal Detecting Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Kimball, coming to you from Central Oklahoma, and I am joined today by my co-host, Grant Hansen, coming to you from New Jersey. How you doing, Grant?
I am doing very well. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing pretty good.
That's excellent to hear. I'm excited. I'm getting on a new property this weekend. It was built in 1800. Yeah, I'm looking forward to finding some old stuff this weekend.
Very nice, very nice. And it's been hot out lately, so make sure you wear some sunblock out there.
Yeah, it's been beautiful. So I go prepared with sunblock. I've got tick spray, hats, everything. So
I did a bunch of yard work last weekend. And I got burnt like crazy. Now I'm blistering, and it's bad.
Man, the one thing I forget, because I don't wear a hat that often, usually when I'm detecting, but if I'm doing stuff in the backyard and I don't have a hat on and I don't remember to spray my head, it still gets through the hair. Just
oh yeah. Then that's the worst spot too, because it gives you a headache. At least me, anyways.
It does, yeah. And then it gets itchy when it starts to go away. It's just it's got to throw a hat on.
Did you see that article with Forrest Finn's treasure has been found? Have you seen that?
I did see that. Yeah. You know, I know we had talked about it on the show a while back, I think. And I was like, wow, someone actually found it. And it was indeed in the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah. Actually, we brought it up a couple times. Even Todd Roy talked about looking for it himself. It's been found now, and it was announced by Forrest Finn, and he's not going to give out the person's information, so the person who found it's going to remain anonymous.
You know, that could be good for that person who found it, but that makes you a little skeptical, doesn't it?
Yes. Like I told you earlier, I don't know. I'm a skeptical person. I don't know. Was it really a treasure even hidden? I mean, this was 10 years exactly. He hid it in 2010. In 2020, the same guy who hid it announced that it's been found, and he is not telling who it was. I didn't even see pictures of the actual treasure or anything. So was it even hidden?
You bring up a really, really good point. I hadn't thought about it because I'm skeptical by nature, but I didn't come across my mind that it might be a hoax.
I don't know. You know, a couple people actually died looking for that treasure, so that would be terrible.
Oh, man, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy. Well, I hope it was real. I hope the person who found it hit pay dirt, and now the government won't come after them for taxes for anything.
Yeah, maybe that's why, you know.
Yeah.
So Sonia, our very own Sonia's got a new video that just came out, and that was her first video. It's a featured video for Sonia about a haunted insane asylum, was it?
Yeah, the Randolph Asylum. It looks really, really creepy, and it seems like a really cool place to go investigating, whether it's metal detecting or ghost hunting.
Yes. Yeah, and it was pretty good watching that. Dave found some pretty cool stuff all in one hole. So y'all go and check it out on YouTube on XP Team USA.
Yeah, go check it out. It's a great video. We'll have more videos coming out. I think I'm going to film this weekend when I'm out, and I might turn it into a contest video. So keep your eyes peeled for that.
Yeah. Also, on the archives, go up there and watch the last In the Zone with RC and Dave. They interviewed the guys who created historical aerials.
Yeah, it's a great listen or a great watch because they're actually on video. I'm sure we've all used that website, so it's really cool to hear from the people who created it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I've used that many times, and it's very interesting listening to them. They even kind of give you a few tips on there, and you can kind of watch them using the software, and it's pretty cool. I've really enjoyed watching that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I look forward to using it more and more as we go on.
Yeah, and that's the greatest thing about their show over there. They add the video where you can actually watch them doing that stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely a different dynamic, and RC is a master at audio and visual, so he works all the controls and gets everything up seamlessly. It's a really well done.
So today we got Steve Warren, the producer of a documentary called Last Raid in Cabin Creek, and its accompanying book, The Second Battle of Cabin Creek, Brilliant Victory. Very good stuff. Very interesting guy. I really look forward to listening to him and seeing what he has to say.
Yeah, I mean, he's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to Civil War and history, and he's made a great documentary and written a great book. So I'm really looking forward to that discussion.
All right. Yeah, when we come back, we'll talk with Steve Warren.
This segment is brought to you by Omega Mill Pouches, the official digging pouch of XP Team USA. If you're looking for a rugged, hunt-tested, washable pouch, look no further than Omega Mill. Get on eBay and search Omega Mill Pouches. That's OMEGAMILL.
We'd like to welcome a historian, TV producer, author, and metal detectorist to our show. He is a producer of the documentary called Last Raid of Cabin Creek and its accompanying book, The Second Battle of Cabin Creek, Brilliant Victory. Let's give a warm welcome to Steve Warren. How you doing, Steve?
Hi. Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the show. I think many of our listeners will know you from your book, but in addition to being an author, you have had a great career in television. Can you tell us how you got started in that medium?
Well, actually started right out of high school, got involved in local radio. There was a little bitty radio station, daylight to dark, basically. Is what the call is what the hours it was on, and I got a little job as the news director, and this was about the time that WKRP was on television, and I used to have a sign on my desk that said, "I am not Les Nessman," but I did little. It was in a little town. It was little then, Claremore, Oklahoma. And went and learned how to do, election coverage and that type of thing, and then got promoted and went up to being a DJ. And from that point, decided to go on to University of Tulsa and get my degree in communications, and then went to the University of Oklahoma for grad school, and actually studied motion picture production in grad school and had a great time. And then, wouldn't you know it, when I graduated, there really wasn't any jobs available in TV until one opened up at a station in Tulsa, KOTV Channel 6 in Tulsa, and worked production, worked on the floor crew, and then had put scripts in all over town, and went to work in advertising. They called me up and said, "Hey, would you like to come work for us as a writer?" So I got to cut my teeth basically selling pizza, selling airline tickets, things like that, but had a great time. And then, of course, several years later, came back to KOTV as not only a promotion producer, but actually was the station's first web producer. So, and I really haven't looked back. Became the web producer, I think it was about 2001, and had been doing commercials and doing local television, and then doing, of course, news, journalism, website stuff all over the country.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So how did your work in television lead you up to working on the documentary called Last Raid of Cabin Creek?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. See, I've always been a Civil War buff. And matter of fact, when I was a kid, my nickname was Johnny Yuma, if you remember that old TV show. I loved it. And I grew up, I was 4 years old in the Centennial. So there was a lot of, Civil War stuff on TV at the time, Mosby's Rangers, and of course, Johnny Yuma, the Rebel, was on network television. And I'd always had this fascination growing up. My parents would always take us on trips, and if we went by an historic site that let us out of the car. And it wasn't that they were trying to get away from us, because 9 times out of 10, my brother and I would be up climbing on these ruins, and we'd look behind us, and my parents would be there too. So just don't tell any park rangers about that. But that interest got me into metal detecting, and got me into thinking more about doing documentaries. And in '89, I shot a little documentary out at the Will Rogers' birthplace, and it was more a little documentary about Civil War reenacting. They were having a little reenactment there, and so I just grabbed the camera. At the time, I was working for a television cable network out of Tulsa, and the network is now CNBC, but in those days it was called Tempo, and we had our own production studio. I was doing on-air promotion for the network, and we had about 65 million subscribers nationwide. And the documentary was only really more of a documentary short, about 8-9 minutes long, but it aired on that network, and it's aired locally in Tulsa. And that really led me to meet people. Matter of fact, I met 2 guys at this reenactment that later became my best friends. I ended up going into business with a fellow in Bartlesville by the name of Rick Harding, and that would lead. He had all the television gear in the Sewell studio in Bartlesville, and because he was a reenactor and had 20-30 years experience being a reenactor, we decided, hey, we need to put our heads together and put together a documentary series about Civil War in Oklahoma, and that's where the documentary for Last Raid at Cabin Creek came about. I wrote the script, did the research and wrote the script. Rick co-directed with me, and what was great was we had his experience especially in editing, when we were putting in like bugle calls. Normally you think of a bugle call one way because you've seen it in the movies, and during the Civil War there were different bugle calls. And that's just one thing that we were able to really we got it right, because we had somebody that was not only the director but basically was technical advisor on a lot of those little details.
It's a great story, and from what I understand, it was pretty well received when you released it. Right? It actually won some awards.
Yes. As a matter of fact, we entered it in just about every little film festival that we could, and we actually won. We it was funny. We won one from Movies on a Shoestring, which the budget in those days, I say those days, that's been 25, 30 years ago, was around $10,000, something like that. And we got our seed money from the local Arts and Humanities Council. And I was trying to raise money in order to at least get, part of the documentary shot. And I even called the local strip club. They were having, they had raised something like $4,000 or $5,000 from their patrons who had given money, and I can't remember if it was during the holidays, and they couldn't find anybody to give it to. And so I was even calling them saying, hey, why don't you help with this Civil War documentary, which I know the guy was like, you got to be kidding me. Of course, they wanted to give it to, like Meals on Wheels or something like that. But we took advantage of, we actually sent Rick up in an airplane and took advantage of a fellow that had a local airport and shot all our aerials. So it's not drone footage. Rick is actually in a Piper Cub leaning out the side of the aircraft as they fly over the battlefield. And so needless to say, we even though it took us about 2 years to put together, we had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little about the Jefferson Davidson historical gold medal you received from the United Daughters of Confederacy because of this project?
Oh, yeah, sure. The Jefferson Davis Gold Medal was presented for not only the documentary, but also for the book. The documentary was released in '92, and I still can't believe it was that long ago. Here we are still talking about it. In '92, we released the documentary. In 2002, I released a book. That was the first edition, self-published hardback. Then in 2012, I don't know how that worked out, but that's when the History Press picked it up for a paperback version. And I was real lucky with that. The United Daughters of the Confederacy presented us the gold medal for not only the documentary but for the book, and that was a very proud moment for me personally, because of all the work that had gone into both projects. Like I said, we've had a lot of fun doing this.
That sounds like it. And for our listeners, if you are Amazon Prime members, you can watch this documentary online as it is included in your membership. So go on to Amazon and search for Last Raid of Cabin Creek. Steve, is there anything our listeners should know or that you'd want to tell them about the documentary before they watch it?
Well, one thing, it's a documentary. I would tell listeners that it's probably one of the most, if not one of the most amazing stories that no one knows about the Civil War. This is about a group of Confederates who basically are not only losing the war, they have no supplies, no shoes. Matter of fact, Brigadier General Richard Deneau wrote to his commanding officer about 2 weeks before they went on the raid that his troops are better off, fighting the enemy than sitting around idling in camps. And because they were watching these wagon trains go basically back and forth between Fort Scott, Kansas to Fort Gibson, Indian Territory, and then over to Fort Smith, Arkansas. It was Stan Wadey, of all people, who planned the raid and had basically sent it up the Confederate High Command in order to get it approved. And for those who don't know, Stan Wadey was the only Native American to reach the rank of Brigadier General on either side during the war. And he also commanded his own field command. He had the 1st Indian Brigade, and which was quite an accomplishment for anyone. But it was Wadey's plan, and then Deneau joined forces with him and executed the plan. And there, of course, you've got to remember too that Texans had been fighting Native Americans, had been fighting Indians for about ever since the last 30 or 40 years before the Civil War. So, needless to say, when they joined together, Wadey decided to have Deneau in to take command, so there would be some cohesion there, and then Wadey would not, lead these Texas troops. And I've always found that to be very interesting. And Deneau writes about that, about how magnanimous Wadey was with that, because Wadey was Deneau's superior, but only by about a month or two.
So with the history of tension between Texans and Native Americans, once they got settled in for that particular piece of the Army, did the tensions lessen, or did they have to deal with that throughout the battle and the raid?
That's a good question. For the sake of the raid, both commanders write, it went along famously. So there was no tension. And I think this was due to how fast they struck. They had met at Camp Pike in the Choctaw Nation and had basically rendezvoused there before they took off. And they had, of course, had a common enemy, which was the Union troops. And you've got to remember that you're looking at a force of a little over 2,000 guys. And this is the forage for the horses. This is, they've probably got a couple of wagons carrying supplies with them. But a lot of the Native Americans, they knew that their horses wouldn't have, oats or fodder. So they would basically, subsist on prairie grass. And so they were, they knew what they had to do. They knew that the train was coming down the Texas road, but they really didn't know when. They had an idea. And it wasn't until after the Battle of Flat Rock, which happened on September 16th, 1864, after they had basically routed the 1st Kansas Colored Infantry unit there, that they knew the wagon train hadn't passed, because from prisoners they got that information. And after that battle, of course, Gannot wrote that we rested on a field of blood, and then that next day he basically sends a runner to Fort Gibson, telling the commander there to come bury the Union dead, and which is unusual. Here he is behind Union lines, and he sends a runner to go tell the commander, hey, we've just taken out a group of your guys, come bury them. And because I think at that point they knew they could grab the train, and get back. But still, today we go, why did he do that? That was certainly taking a chance.
Mm-hmm.
So your book, The Second Battle of Cabin Creek, A Brilliant Victory, is a companion to the documentary. Can you tell us a little bit about that companionship?
Well, the book tries to fill in what the documentary leaves out. Of course, by the time we do the book, we found out a little bit more about the battle. We found, just little ancillary things that I thought people would be interested in. Even today, I'm still finding out stuff about the battle. One thing is that, we tried to squeeze everything we could in a 90-minute documentary. Of course, nowadays they call that feature length. In those days, we were like, longer is better,
mm-hmm.
but not necessarily. In 2003, I went into a studio in Spokane, Washington, and cut the documentary down to 45 minutes and thought it moved faster, for the audience. We were at the Will Rogers Museum in 2018. They asked us to come and do a screening, and it was basically the 25th anniversary of the documentary. And we were going to show that 45-minute version, and the director up there, Tad Jones, I've known him since he was a kid, he put in a 90-minute by mistake. So we had to stop right where the battle started, and I had to get up and do a little 5-minute filler saying, come back and see it sometime. He's going to have it here, and you get it for free to see it. But we're still finding out just little bitty things about that battle. One interesting one is a fellow by the name of Edgar A. Barker. He was the captain in charge of the 2nd Kansas Company that was at the Battle of Flat Rock. It is known that he basically told the black troops and the white lieutenant that was over them, you're on your own. I'm going to mount up and take the rest of the guys and try to bust through the Confederate lines, make it to Fort Gibson, and bring relief. They didn't quite make all of them make it through there, through those lines. The black troops, of course, were killed. Not all of them. I think there were 4 left alive. And, of course, the white lieutenant, Sutherland, he went on with the rest of the prisoners and ended up at Camp Ford near Tyler, Texas, for the duration of the war. Barker would later ride with George Custer during the Indian Uprising of 1867, and he would be a captain in the 18th Kansas, and would serve about a year and a half. And then basically, as many people do, he fades away out of the historical record. I mean, there is no way that I can track him. But then the other day, I happened to look and as I always do in these old newspapers and records, and he had passed away, I believe it was before 1890. He lived in Junction City, Kansas, after the war. And I just kind of find it fascinating to look at these men, at what they did, after the war.
Yeah, it just sounds like an amazing story. And what a time to have been there to go through it. Must have been probably quite terrifying, I would imagine. And for all our listeners, the Second Battle of Cabin Creek, Brilliant Victory is available on Amazon. I encourage you to check it out. Steve, what did you learn personally when creating both the documentary and writing your book?
I would say, if there was a message, I guess, in the documentary in the book would be never give up. These guys that fought for the Confederacy at that time, of course, the Confederacy was losing the war, but of course in the backwater, as Indian Territory was known as the war was just being fought, probably just as savage as it was in the East. Ed Bars, who is the, of course, chief historian emeritus of the National Park Service, he called the war in Indian Territory war to the knife, and the knife was usually at the hilt, and it was savage, and it on both sides. William A. Phillips, who was the colonel at Fort Gibson at the time of the second Union invasion in January, February of '64, had given orders on that raid not to take any prisoners, not to take any Confederate prisoners. And of course, the Confederates at Cabin Creek, or at Flat Rock, on the way to Cabin Creek, they really didn't want to take any of the black prisoners, but they did. They took about 4 black prisoners, but they pulled a bunch out of the creek bottoms and shot them or bayoneted them there. Also, it was kind of Indian Territory was a microcosm of the war. One of the Confederate veterans on the raid remembers, particularly at the Battle of Flat Rock, a son capturing his father in a different uniform, and a brother in Confederate gray capturing his brother in Federal blue. So Indian Territory was, the fights were just as savage. And a friend of mine, he's passed away now, his name was Whit Edwards. He wrote the book that the Oklahoma Historical Society still sells. It's called The Prairie Was on Fire, The Civil War in Indian Territory.
Yes.
And he actually went down to Tahlequah and looked through Cherokee National Museum papers. And growing up, and for years, we only thought that there were approximately, in the whole, 1861 to 65, there was probably 101 skirmishes and battles, fights in Indian Territory. And Whit was able to find the instances of at least 60 to 70 more that are not recorded. So, and of course that could have probably only been with, 5 people on one side and 5 people on the other. But that's how kind of the war was. There are instances when I was doing my research that the people who lived in Indian Territory, the Confederates would come and take what they had for supplies and leave half of it, and then the Union Army came and took the other half. So they were caught in the middle, and this led to probably at least 100,000 people who basically went to Kansas, to northern Kansas, for the duration of the war, just to get out of the way of these two armies.
Yeah, that's a very good book, too. I got that book, The Prairie Was on Fire. I got an autographed book, Whit Edwards. Very interesting. I did not know he
was a good
passed
guy.
away.
And we'll be right back with Steve Warren.
Hi, this is Dave D.
Hi, this is Sonia.
R.C. Dunn.
This is Alan. Jeff. We're the Minnesota Beach Boys.
This is Kendall.
This is David Kimball.
This is Grant Hansen.
Steve Center.
Lynn Quelland.
Hi, this is John.
Josh Kemmel.
Cameron Macer.
Pete Sorrell.
And we are
XP Team USA.
And you are listening to the Metal Detecting Podcast.
XP Metal Detectors now introduces the new X35 search coils. Designed around a brand new electronic advances, these new high-performance and versatile coils will allow you to choose from a wide range of frequencies, ranging from 3.7 kHz to 27.7 kHz. In total, there are 35 available frequencies based around 5 main frequencies that are quickly accessible. A new boost mode is now an option on frequencies 3.7 kHz to 4.4 kHz and can significantly increase detection depth on highly conductive targets such as large masses and large silver coins. The new X35 search coils will now be available as option as the same price as the previous coils, and also now will be standard with a brand new Deus. So get your X35 today.
And we are back with Steve Warren.
So did your passion for history drive your passion for metal detecting, or was it the other way?
I think it was my passion for history that drove me into metal detecting, because the people that got me into it, I was at the Honey Springs reenactment in 1989, had a little booth set up. It wasn't much of a booth. I think it was a card table. And some of the little videotapes of the documentary short I had, I think I was selling them for $5 or $10 a piece. And up walked this couple who we got to talking, and we had a lot of things in common. And they said, hey, you want to come metal detect with us sometime? And I'm sure. Where do you go? And of course, he said Cabin Creek. In those days, you could do that. Now you can't, because it's all owned by the state. And I said, sure. So that September, I called them. That was in September of 89. It is June of 2020, and I'm still calling them. They're kind of like my second set of parents. Their names are Jack and Norma Jean Mullen, and they were metal detecting when it wasn't cool. They have a relic room that is beyond belief, and a lot of stories to tell about detecting at Jenkins Ferry and Cabin Creek, and of course all through Arkansas and Mississippi. But especially for me, going up to Cabin Creek and metal detecting and finding this stuff, it was just, for me, a dream come true. And that's when I thought to myself, I basically went and that moment joined in those days it was the Civil War Preservation Trust. Now it's the American Battlefield Trust. And I would recommend any of your listeners, please join that organization. It's a very good organization. It's a 501c3 charity, and they are rated 5, I believe, on the charity scale, which is the highest. And so most of the money goes into buying and protecting battlefield land. But one thing that we were able to answer, and as a matter of fact, I'm writing an article on that now, is another fellow and I actually found the Pryor Creek battlefield. This is the battle that happened the next day after Cabin Creek, when Wadey and Gano win at Cabin Creek. They start down Texas Road, and of course their scouts encounter these people in these Federals, who they think they're Federals, in blue, and it turns out to be some of Quantrill's command coming up from Texas. So they prevented a fight because apparently William Adair, who Adair, Oklahoma is named for, actually that's named for his brother, but W.T. Adair, who Will Rogers is named for, William Penn Adair Rogers, actually his scouts encountered Quantrill, a group of Quantrill's men, and actually knew some of them, or knew them by name, or they knew him. And so that prevented a fight, a needless fight between Confederate guerrillas and Confederate regulars. But they go on down to Pryor Creek, and that's where the Union has, of course, come up the Texas Road after receiving word that the black troops, their unit had been virtually wiped out at the Hay Camp at Flat Rock. And Major, later Brigadier General at this point, James M. Williams, he has his brigade, plus they have 2 cannon that are rifled. They can shoot Hotchkiss Parrott, and they can shoot Hotchkiss per Parrott. And that's the reason I mention that. I'll mention that in just a second. But my buddy Joe Poplin is the fellow that I found the Pryor Creek battlefield with. And using some of Whit Edwards' research, we were able to pinpoint where this battlefield was. And it's out in the middle of nowhere. People had forgotten. And, of course, in those days, it was way out there. But so Williams is coming up the Texas Road with his, matter of fact, with his command that is the 1st Kansas Colored Infantry. And then the Texans and the Indians are coming down the Texas Road, and they meet there at Pryor Creek. The Federals are dug in on the south side. The Confederates encounter them through basically an artillery barrage that happens with their forward scouts. This happens on the 20th, the day after Cabin Creek, and just as it's getting dark, they're having kind of a little firefight. And so Williams tells his troops to dig in. We're going to have a big fight tomorrow. And in the meantime, he can look across the field and see and hear the Confederates. They're building big fires. They're corralling the wagons, and he can hear it. So they can see the fires. They know where the enemy is. They just have to wait till the next morning. And then, of course, the sun comes up the next morning, and all the Union troops find are just roaring embers on the fires. The Confederates had sneaked away with the wagon train during the night, and because of that forced march that they had done, they couldn't go after them. So Williams has to sit and rest with his troops. Meanwhile, waiting to know, and of course, Captain Martin and all his scouts know that country like the back of their hand, and they end up over what is now Claremore Mound, and where the Verdigris River is, and that's where Wadey takes all the whiskey and dumps it in the Verdigris River, because he doesn't want anything. He didn't want his troops to drink it, and didn't want anything to mar their victory. But back in 97, Joe and I pinpointed where the Pryor Creek battlefield was, and sure enough, we went, and I'll never forget that day. I could only be there for a length of time. I was a brand new dad, and Joe is basically kin to half the county, which helps when you're trying to metal detect. And sure enough, some cousin-in-law knew the guy that owned the property, and that's how we got on the property. And we both said, okay, well, I'll see you for lunch. I'll go this way, you go that way. And we met for lunch, and he walked up, and I said, well, did you find anything? I found a shotgun slug, and he put a mini ball right on top of the cooler. And I will never forget that moment, because we basically found artillery fragments, mini balls, you name it, from that fight. And Joe retired and moved, and a couple of years ago, I inherited, so I have all the lead fragments now, which I have to pull out and take pictures of for my article. But it was a big thrill, and we are going to, of course, like to give the coordinates for the Oklahoma Historical Society so they know, because several people had written articles saying it had been to the north and to the west, but we definitely hit it right on the spot.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. For those who are looking to gain their own permission on Civil War sites, what advice would you give them, at least that you're willing to share?
Oh, that's no big secret. Knock on the door, and don't have your digging clothes on. Be nice, be presentable. Always have a card with your name on it and your phone number. Don't ever mention treasure. Don't ever mention gold, silver. You can say relics. That has gotten me out of a few situations when you say I'm looking for relics, not for gold or silver. But basically, be nice. Ask about the history. Ask the owner, do they know about the history? If you get them talking, they might even want to walk along with you for a little bit to see what you're finding. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, people could care less. They really could. And of course, my luck, I always get that one guy that's going to say no. But that's why you have that little card, because you give him your card with your number on it and say, you know what, thank you for talking with me. If you ever change your mind, here's my number. Just, give me a call. And just, this doesn't have to be an hour visit. This is just like a little 10, 15, 20-minute talk on the front porch. And sometimes if they see how interested you are in history, that is the key. And then that gets you on property. And also, when you say you let them, say, hey, if I find this, I'll give this to you. It's always best if you find some like Indian head penny or something that someone dropped on the property, make up a little display and give it to the owner. That goes a long way too. We used to call that priming the relic pump, especially if you would do that for the owner's kids or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
So you've been on some great sites, obviously. What are some of the better relics you have found?
Oh, every type of mini ball, I guess. I haven't found a Confederate belt plate, although I would love to. I'm still looking for that. Maybe I can do that now in Florida, is look for that. I found a breastplate, Union breastplate, on an artillery emplacement in Suffolk, Virginia, almost downtown Suffolk, Virginia. I've been able to hunt, Swope Park in Kansas City, which was a site of Civil War battles, if you can believe that. We would go out and look for great shot there in those hills. I found great shot. I found artillery fragments. My cannonball that I found didn't come from a Civil War site in Oklahoma or in Virginia, but of all places came from Idaho. It was a site where the 4th Infantry was sent. Another black unit was under the command of a guy by the name of William Carlin, who was a brigadier general in the Civil War, and they had a Union problem. It was the miners all had this big uprising and big strike near Wallace, Idaho, and he and the 4th Infantry, Carlin and 4th Infantry, went and basically put down these riots. And one of the places that they set up that we metal detected is where they set their artillery piece, which was basically a 12-pound bronze cannon from the Civil War, and I found one of those cannonballs that they left years later. It was about 2 foot down, and it just tickled me to death. And I've been lucky enough to hunt on William Nolan's property in Kansas City. Nolan was one of Quantrill's guerrillas, and we were able to find remnants of where his first house stood and how the Union had burned that house. Union troops had burned his house for being a guerrilla, and was able to find, we didn't find really a lot of military stuff there, but we found a lot of, Civil War era civilian stuff. And I've been lucky to hunt Jenkins Ferry with Jack and Norma, and a fellow by the name of Jerry Hayden, who has passed away now. He, at one time, was a reenactor. We used to call him the last living Confederate veteran. He knew a lot about the Civil War, and worked for American Airlines for more than 30 years. And I spent a lot of time with him jumping on airplanes, going to Civil War shows. And but in those days, Jack and Norma would go with us, and they would talk about finding so many relics that when they go to Civil War shows, they'd say, "Oh, we don't need to buy that. We'll go find that." Well, of course, now you can't do that. But every once in a while, things will still be found where you least expect it. In Washington State, I dug at least a couple of hundred mini balls, 58 caliber mini balls, on the site of what was known as Fort Coeur d'Alene and later Fort Sherman, and they were still using Civil War surplus. This was in 1877, 1878, and they were still training their troops to use Civil War surplus. And I wrote an article about that in 93, I think it was, for North-South Trader, and I need to pull that out and post it on social media just to show, because there was a lot more found in Idaho and Washington State than a lot of people realize, because not only during the war but after the war, all of these ex-Union and Confederate veterans, a lot of them headed to the Pacific Northwest to start new lives, and you can still find things in flea markets, antique stores. One of my best finds in a flea market was I paid a whopping $1 for a Civil War saber belt plate, and it looked like the guy, I still have it, it looks like the guy took it off yesterday, and just laying on the dollar table. And needless to say, I had to go outside and had to catch my breath after that purchase. But it's been a lot of fun. I've kept, much to my wife's chagrin, a lot of the stuff that I found, including every mini ball, every piece of cannonball, every fragment, every piece of grape, and that's where we found parts off guns, which is really neat. I think though that one of the more personal things that I found are buttons, and also are insignia or something that they had on their person at the time. One little thing that is shown in one of Stanley Phillips' books I found was one of these. It's like a little horse that they probably just had as just a decoration, either on their harness or had it somewhere on their hat or their uniform.
Oh, wow.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah. So let me ask you, Steve, if you could detect anywhere in the U.S. that's always been off limits to metal detecting, where would you hunt?
The White House lawn.
That has been my answer and a few others.
Yep, that's great. I'd love a chance at that too.
I've always been asked that. Some people say, well, let's go to Gettysburg, but Gettysburg, was hunted basically really well because they were, in those days, I still can't believe it, but they were eyeballing relics. You read these accounts of these guys that were eyeballing relics right up until after the turn of the century. One account has one little boy saying after it rained, their field would just be white with mini balls, and they'd go pick up that lead and turn it in, for money. And of course, you had veterans going to scour, the battlefields at Chattanooga, Cedar Mountain, near Chancellorsville. You had, matter of fact, at the Chickamauga, there's an account of about 30 years after the war that there's an account that people were actually making souvenirs, making mini balls because everything had been found. Because at that point they didn't have metal detectors, so they thought they had found everything, just by eyeballing. And still every once in a while, somebody will make a find like that. I have not been that lucky yet.
Well, maybe one day. You certainly get on good enough sites, but yeah. So if anyone's interested in reading some of your articles or arranging to invite you as a guest speaker, what guidance should we give them?
They can, for guest speaking, they can just email me at Civil Warren, just Civil with my last name, Warren, WARREN, at yahoo.com. They can go to our Facebook pages. We have one, the Second Battle of Cabin Creek, Brilliant Victory. We have Last Raid at Cabin Creek, has its own Facebook page. And then Cabin Creek Battlefield also has its own Facebook page. So they can either reach out to me by email or they can contact me through either of those three pages.
Yeah, and I want to remind everybody, if you want to watch the documentary called The Last Raid of Cabin Creek, it is on Amazon, and if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can watch it for free. Also, you could go to Amazon and buy the Steve Warren's book, The Second Battle of Cabin Creek, Brilliant Victory, and that'll be that's also available on Amazon. And we really appreciate talking to you and listening to you. It was great listening to all your stories, and learned a lot. It was pretty cool.
Well, thank you so much. I really had a great time.
Yeah, thank you. I learned a lot. It was a pleasure listening to you, and I'm going to dive in to your documentary. I've watched a bunch of it. I'm going to watch the rest of it, and thanks for putting out some great content.
Oh yeah, and I'm going to order
thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm going to order your book too after I watch that. I'm very interested in that kind of stuff. It's especially being here in Oklahoma, and we'd love to have you back again sometime. Also.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to.
Great.
All right. Well, we'll see you.
Take care, Steve.
Check us out online at xpteamusa.com.
XP has introduced its new ORX machine, a high-end machine at a mid-range price. The ORX has 4 factory preset programs, 2 gold, 2 coins, also 2 user programs. The ORX comes with a high-frequency coil and is compatible with the X35 coils. The ORX is now available in the USA.
All right, that was Steve Warren. Very interesting guy. He knows a lot of his stuff.
He really does. I mean, he's definitely done his research, and it's fueled from a passion that he has. And I'll remind everybody, go on to Amazon Prime. I'm sure most of you are members. You can watch his documentary for free. So check that out.
Yeah, I'm going to be watching that this weekend. I have not had a chance to watch it yet. Have you got to watch yours yet?
I've watched part of it. I haven't watched the whole thing. I got to go back and finish. It's really well done.
Yeah, and I'm probably going to get that book too. He mentioned that the other book, the eyewitness accounts of the Civil War in the Indian Territory. I got that book, and that was very good. So I might be interested. I'm going to have to get his book and read that. The Second Battle of Cabin Creek, Brilliant Victory. It sounds very interesting.
Definitely does, yeah. So, we'll probably have him back on someday and talk more about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so go to our YouTube channel and check out our XP Team USA videos. We have lots of cool videos on there. And also go check out the live show In the Zone with RC and Dave every other Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time.
Yep, and if you want more awesome content, swing over to Beyond Sight and Sound with Josh Kimmel. He's every Sunday and Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern.
And we have an announcement we're going to make today. We are going on vacation, summer vacation, and we will be back after Labor Day.
Yep, same as last year, taking the summer off. Well, not really. We're both working, and you're going to school on top of it. But we'll get some great interviews over the summer, and we'll come back and air them after Labor Day.
I got a lot of stuff going, so I got to take a break and take a few shows off.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing you, and hang out with us on the Facebook page. In the meantime, at XP Team USA, we're very active there, and we'll stay in touch.
All right. Well, we'll see everybody.
Bye.
Right. Bye.
Get that permission, put the coil to the soil, and we'll catch you next time right here on the Metal Detecting Podcast. Brought to you by XP Metal Detectors.